The first insult hit the girl like a stone. "Move along, kid. You don't belong here." The words came sharp, spat out with disgust, as the teenager stood at the corner of a busy city street. Crowds pressed past her, all pretending not to hear, not to see, as if the moment had no weight. But to her, it did, because just a few feet away, slumped against a cold wall, was a man wrapped in rags, his skin pale beneath layers of grime, his hair matted from days of neglect. He looked like a ghost society had forgotten. She clutched the small paper bag in her hands. Inside was a sandwich, simple, ordinary, but to someone who hadn't eaten in days, it could mean the difference between another breath or silence forever. The insult stung, but she didn't flinch. She crouched down, held the bag toward him, and said nothing. Her actions spoke louder than anything she could ever say. The man raised his head. His eyes were startlingly clear, almost out of place on a face so worn and ragged. For a fleeting second, sorrow flickered across them, followed by something else, a quiet recognition, as though her small act had pierced through an armor built over years of disappointment. And that was the moment the crowd began to murmur. Strangers whispered, some sneering, others shaking their heads. One woman scoffed, "Don't waste your food. These people never change." But the girl stayed there, unmoved, her posture calm, her gaze unashamed. Her silence was defiance. Her silence was her dignity. What she did not know was that this act, this one simple act, was about to change her life. By the next morning, police cars would surround her house, officers knocking with a tone that carried both authority and confusion. She would stand in the doorway, heart pounding, as the truth unraveled. The man she had fed was not who he seemed. The night before that storm, her life had been painfully ordinary. Her name was Aaliyah, a 16-year-old girl with skin the color of midnight, hair tied back in a bun that always came loose halfway through the day, and eyes that carried more wisdom than her years. She lived with her mother in a modest apartment above a laundromat, where the smell of detergent clung to the walls. Money was always tight. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse, often too tired to even eat dinner. Aaliyah had learned to navigate hunger, both her own and her family's. Yet, she had also learned to notice hunger in others, the hollow look in a person's eyes, the way they held their stomach when they thought no one was watching. That evening, walking home with the sandwich she had saved from school lunch, she saw the man slumped against the wall. She could not ignore him. The city around her was a symphony of chaos. Blaring horns, vendors shouting, people rushing with coffee cups and briefcases. In all that noise, his silence screamed the loudest. She approached him not because it was safe, not because it was wise, but because compassion pulled her forward. As she placed the sandwich in his trembling hands, his fingers brushed hers, rough, calloused, but steady. For a moment, he looked at her as though she were the first person in years to truly see him. Then he lowered his gaze, whispering something too soft for her to hear. The crowd dispersed, life went on, but the weight of that gaze stayed with her through the night. What Aaliyah didn't know was that the man was not what he appeared. His name was Marcus Hale, a billionaire who had built his empire from nothing, only to disguise himself as a vagrant to see the world through different eyes. He had walked the streets for weeks, ignored by thousands, treated as trash, invisible to those who boasted of charity yet never stopped to care. And now, this one girl, this child who had almost nothing, had given him everything he had been searching for, proof that humanity still lived. At dawn, the city was quieter. Aaliyah awoke to the heavy pounding at the door. Her mother, weary-eyed and startled, opened it to find uniformed officers lined across the hallway. Neighbors peeked from their doors, whispers spreading like wildfire. Aaliyah's heart raced. "Is this the residence of Aaliyah Johnson?" one officer asked. Fear coiled in her stomach. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. "Yes, that's me." The officer studied her, then exchanged a look with his partner. "We need you to come with us, immediately." Gasps rippled from the neighbors. Her mother's hand shook as she clutched her daughter's arm. "What has she done?" The officer's tone softened, confusion in his eyes. "Nothing. She hasn't done anything wrong, but someone important wants to see her." They escorted Aaliyah into the waiting car. The ride was silent, the city rolling past in a blur of concrete and steel. She pressed her forehead to the glass, wondering if she was dreaming, if perhaps she was being punished for kindness. When the car stopped, she found herself standing before towering gates gilded with intricate ironwork. Beyond them rose a mansion so vast it seemed carved from a fairy tale. The officers opened the gates, leading her up the sweeping driveway. Every step felt heavier, as though she were walking deeper into a story she did not understand. Inside, chandeliers spilled golden light across marble floors. Servants moved quietly, eyes lowering in respect not to her, but to the man waiting at the far end of the hall. He no longer wore rags. His suit was tailored, crisp, the kind that whispered wealth with every stitch. But his eyes, those clear, sorrowful eyes, were the same. It was the homeless man. Aaliyah froze. Her chest tightened as realization crashed over her. He approached slowly, each step deliberate, as though he too carried the weight of the moment. Yesterday he began, his voice deep, measured. "You gave me a sandwich, but you gave me more than that. You gave me what money can't buy, dignity." Her breath caught. She could hardly believe it. The world tilted beneath her feet. He went on, his gaze never leaving hers. "For weeks I have walked this city, testing hearts. People looked through me, over me, around me as if I were nothing. But you looked at me, you saw me, and you acted." The room was silent. Even the servants seemed to hold their breath. Then he spoke words that would etch themselves into her soul forever. "Sometimes the richest gifts come from the poorest hands." Tears blurred her vision. She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I didn't do anything special." His reply came swift, certain. "That's what makes it special. You gave without expecting. You gave while the world mocked you. And that silence, that courage, it is worth more than gold." He turned to the officers. "This girl is under my protection now." The power in his words was undeniable. The officers nodded, stepping back, their duty complete. But Marcus Hale was not finished. He led Aaliyah and her mother into his study, where sunlight poured through tall windows. On the desk lay papers, scholarship forms, trust documents, opportunities that could change their lives. He slid them toward her with a steady hand. "This is not charity," he said firmly. "This is justice. You gave when you had little. Now I give because I have much." Not to erase your act, but to honor it. Her mother wept openly, clutching her daughter's shoulders. Aaliyah, though trembling, lifted her chin. Her silence once again became her strength, her gaze steady, her heart unshaken. Marcus Hale studied her a moment longer, then spoke one final line that carried the weight of his journey. "The world tests us in silence, and in silence we reveal who we truly are." By the time Aaliyah and her mother returned home, the story had already spread. News outlets carried the headline, "Teen gives sandwich to homeless man, finds herself in mansion of billionaire." Crowds gathered at her school, not to mock but to cheer. Strangers who once looked away now looked up to her. But Aaliyah never let it change her. She still carried her small lunch bag, still noticed the hungry eyes on street corners, still believed in giving quietly without spectacle. Because true dignity was never in the reward, it was in the act. And as the world buzzed around her, she carried within her the quiet truth that had changed everything. That sometimes the smallest kindness can shake the foundations of the mightiest wall. She would never forget his words, etched forever in her heart. Sometimes the richest gifts come from the poorest hands. And those who once mocked her silence would never forget the sight of her standing in that mansion, unafraid, unshaken, proof that dignity is stronger than gold.